I know you want to talk a little bit about the former vice president's new manufacturing plan, the Build Back Better plan. Obviously, Michigan, manufacturing, infrastructure, huge parts of what we do here. So walk me through this plan.
Sure. I mean, the challenge that we have here is that Donald Trump's disastrous policies have left us in the worst ditch in our lifetime. And what's important to understand is that we were already in a manufacturing recession prior to when we had the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, you look at where we were. Donald Trump promised that we were never going to see a plant closure. Those weren't my words. Those were his words, repeatedly uttered in Michigan and elsewhere. And we see a manufacturing recession because of so many failures. Joe Biden understands that job one is to bring back jobs, good middle class jobs. So he has a very, very robust plan to invest in a modern infrastructure, roads, bridges, rail, aviation, ports, everything like that, making sure we're generating good, clean energy jobs. You look at the opportunities we have to make things in America. You look at the fact that China right now, is on pace to have 4 times the global market share of electric vehicles. We should own that market, and we should own it in places like Michigan. And Joe Biden has a plan to make sure we're investing in those jobs, transforming our infrastructure, positioning the auto industry so that we can win the 21st century by investing in clean energy, investing in electric vehicles, investing in charging stations across the country. This is how we do it. And Joe Biden, Barack Obama and Joe Biden did it before. We saved the auto industry as Democrats. This president talked a mean game, but he has failed in that. And Joe Biden has a very, very aggressive plan that will really help bring Michigan back.
I want to ask, there's been considerable criticism from the National Republican Party, but specifically here the Michigan GOP, that this plan is, to them, overly cozy with the progressive left of the Democratic Party. So I've got 2 questions here on this. The first, do you think this plan will be enough to convince those members of the progressive side of your party to get on board with Joe Biden?
Joe Biden won every county in Michigan in the Michigan primary. Michiganders know Joe Biden. They know Barack Obama. They know who saved the auto industry. It was Democrats, and in particular, it was Joe Biden and Barack Obama. They know who has presided over, again, a manufacturing recession. Look what's happened in the auto industry. It predates coronavirus. And they've seen Donald Trump's repeated broken promises. And this is about creating good middle-class jobs. This is about, I think a job is a good job that pays a decent wage that allows you to sustain your family is what the American dream is all about. And when you talk about the investments that have been made, I was stunned that Donald Trump in year 1 didn't make a major investment in infrastructure. He talked about it in 2016, but his focus in 2017 was repealing the Affordable Care Act and passing a reckless tax cut for people like himself. Joe Biden's year 1 is going to be about investing in infrastructure, making sure we position the auto industry to win the 21st century. That's what we're doing, and we have a track record. And I think this isn't a plan for one set of stakeholder groups. This is a plan that's going to attract Republicans, Democrats, and independents, because what they all have in common is they want a president who will lead us. They want a president who will keep his promises, create good jobs, create good union jobs. Joe Biden is very proud of the fact that these jobs that he's creating are good union jobs, and that's what we need in Michigan and elsewhere.
I suspect your answer to this next question might be similar to what you just said, but on the flip side of this plan that folds in portions of the Green New Deal, are you worried that it could alienate some conservatives or Republicans who are newly soured on the president?
We're investing in clean energy. The clean energy isn't an idea of one stakeholder group within the party. Clean energy is an environmental imperative. It's an economic imperative moving forward. We made so much progress in the Obama-Biden administration. in this area. We know we need to have a cleaner, safer, modern infrastructure. And when we do that, that's how we create jobs. We need to have broadband access. And one thing that this coronavirus pandemic has laid bare is that if we're trying to educate our children remotely and we don't have access to broadband in certain parts of the state of Michigan or any state, that's catastrophic to our basic needs. These are the things that Joe Biden is creating. What the Republicans are trying to do is they're morally bankrupt. They don't have any ideas other than tax cuts for wealthy people. And so what they try to do is distract, and they'll continue to distract. They'll call it socialism. No, this is about creating good middle-class jobs and putting people back to work. Here's the reality. Are Michiganders better off now than they were 4 years ago? A 21% unemployment rate, third highest in the country. Donald Trump's failure to take on China. Michigan's taken it on the chin because of his failed China policies. Farmers in Michigan taking it on the chin. And a year ago, Donald Trump said farmers were over the hump. Well, farmers in Michigan and elsewhere are over the barrel. And that's why we need Joe Biden and his leadership, his demonstrated leadership. And that's why, again, he won every county in Michigan in the primary. Michiganders trust Joe Biden.
I want to circle back to the economy in just a minute, but obviously everything shadowing this right now is the pandemic. And so Michigan was so hard hit at the beginning of this. We're seeing a surge again, like many other states. What would a Democratic administration look like? How would we handle this pandemic that this administration would inherit?
We follow the science first and foremost. We listen to the experts. When we confronted the Ebola crisis in 2014, Barack Obama and Joe Biden listened to the experts. Dr. Fauci was someone who was embraced and listened to, not someone who was ridiculed. You look at what the U.S. trade representative did just the other day, printing an op-ed excoriating Dr. Fauci. We need to have no infighting. We need to have an administration that has a united purpose, that doesn't send mixed signals. Masks are not a political statement. Masks are a public health imperative. And Joe Biden has made a commitment to making sure we listen to the science. We invest in testing. We invest in all of the things that need to be done. We don't have the necessary equipment. Donald Trump had the ability to summon industries across this country so that we could have the requisite PPE. He failed to do that. This has been an abject failure. It didn't have to be this bad. Donald Trump didn't cause the coronavirus, but his failed leadership has contributed to needless deaths, has contributed to the unprecedented economic collapse that we've seen. 17 weeks in a row of 1 million or more first-time claims for unemployment, and Michiganders are taking it on the chin. Joe Biden has a very aggressive plan, testing and tracing and understanding that we can't get our economy back until we fix the public health.
I'm glad you brought up the unemployment numbers, because that's my next question here. We're about 2 weeks out from the end of the unemployment stimulus checks, those extra $600 for people. Would we see a permanent placement of that money under Joe Biden as president?
Well, we need to make sure that we continue to help Americans as long as they're out of work. When you establish an arbitrary deadline and say we're going to do away with these benefits after July 31st, because you're absolutely right, and you look at and you see this week we saw, I believe, 2.4 million first-time claims for unemployment. That was larger than last week, and last week was larger than the week before. We are trending in the wrong direction. Over 50 million people have filed first-time claims for unemployment. That is absolutely epic collapse of our economy. And until our economy has rebounded, or to put it differently, until we've been able to address this pandemic, then we must continue these benefits. And the Democrats and the Democratic delegation from Michigan's been fighting hard for this. The HEROES Act extends these benefits. And equally importantly, if you lose your job, you often lose your health care. There's a provision there to extend COBRA benefits. So the federal government would pay for your health care. State and local governments, including the state of Michigan, taking it on the chin. There's a provision in the HEROES Act to give funding so we don't have to lay off first responders. The notion that paramedics are in danger of losing their job in the middle of a pandemic is nuts, and we need to protect them. These are things that Democrats are fighting to do, but Republicans have said, we don't need it. Boy, they're really out of touch with everyday Michiganders.
When we talk about those essential workers who've been hit by the virus and then the economic impact of the virus, especially in Michigan and especially in Detroit, a lot of those workers are Black or brown people, and specifically Black and brown women. How would a Joe Biden administration and a Democratic administration address the intersection of economics, pandemic, and race?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely correct that the coronavirus has disproportionately touched African American, Latino, Native American communities. You go out to the Navajo Nation and in Arizona, and you see so many challenges. You talk with Native American communities in Michigan. You see the same challenges there. And Joe Biden understands the intersectionality. We have to make investments in communities of color. There's so many comorbidities among Latinos, a higher incidence of diabetes. Same thing with African Americans, a higher incidence of diabetes. That puts you at risk for coronavirus. But when you have a president that is saying to essential workers, you need to go to work, and we're effectively giving a free pass on worker safety, that's what's happening. Look at meatpacking plants across this country. Meatpacking plants disproportionately employ workers of color. This administration has basically said to OSHA, keep your hands off of meatpacking. We'd rather see more meat produced for consumption than workers saved. And so what Joe Biden understands is, number one, we've got to protect our workers. You don't use a pandemic as an opportunity to suspend occupational safety and health. If you're calling a worker essential, you got to mean it by protecting that worker and paying that worker. And Joe Biden also understands, and Barack Obama before him understood, we need to address the underlying social determinants that have created so many of the racial disparities. If you're living in lead paint infested housing, and all too many communities of color are suffering from that. If you've lost your job, if you are, if you have all of these perfect storm factors, it's going to create real problems. And Joe Biden understands that we have to address these very, very real systemic challenges confronting minority communities. And by the way, one of the things you have to do is make sure you have access to health care. And the notion that you have a president of the United States in the middle of a pandemic that filed a brief in front of the Supreme Court doing away with the Affordable Care Act, that's nuts. And that is exactly what we don't need. That hurts everybody, but it disproportionately hurts communities of color.
When we talk about the systemic racial issues right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about policing and race. Detroit, recently there was an officer-involved shooting here that sparked a protest that continued for several days. Given some gaffes that the former vice president has made in the past, what would a message from a Democratic White House sound like on healing the divide between police and those communities of color in these larger cities?
Well, I think the vice president, look at his record. I look at people's actions. I spent over a decade of my career at the Justice Department working on police misconduct cases. I have an acute understanding of what's needed there. And the tool that we used that was one of the most effective tools was our pattern and practice authority that enabled us to address systemic reform needs in police departments across the country. And the person who wrote the bill that gave us that authority was Joe Biden. Joe Biden understands that the most important asset a police officer has is the trust of the community that he or she is serving. And what happened in Minnesota, George Floyd's murder, laid bare a system in which all too many police officers have a callous disregard for human life. And Joe Biden understands that. And he, again, has a track record. So to address your question, he has put forth a very aggressive plan to give the Justice Department the tools to succeed, to give local law enforcement the tools to engage in true community policing. He believes, Joe Biden that is, believes that community policing, when you build those relationships of trust, you can reduce crime, restore respect for law enforcement, and create truly vibrant communities. Donald Trump believes that you just throw gasoline on the fire. Look at what he's done in the aftermath. His attorney general has said there's no need for a pattern of practice investigation of the Minneapolis Police Department. According to Attorney General Barr, there appears to be nothing systemically wrong in the Minneapolis Police Department. I can't understand how an attorney general could not understand the necessity of looking soup to nuts at the Minneapolis Police Department. When I led the Civil Rights Division, we did that. We aggressively enforced those laws. Joe Biden will ensure that we do the same and give more tools to communities, to the Justice Department, to the entire ecosystem to make sure that we address these issues once and for all. Donald Trump has no moral authority to do this. He has been a divider in chief. And he has an old school mentality. You're either with the police or you're against the police. That hurts all the police officers who are trying to do their job. That us against them. But that's Donald Trump all the time. It's always pitting one group against another. And that's why we need Joe Biden now. We need a uniter in chief, not a divider in chief.
I've got just two more questions here for you. I want to turn to the Senate race here in Michigan for Senator Gary Peters' seat. Senator Peters has been outraised 4 quarters in a row by John James, and the race is appearing to be one of the tighter ones right now in the Senate. Are Democrats worried that this seat could be lost?
Well, I have a lot of confidence in Senator Peters. I have a lot of confidence in the coordinated campaign. I worked very closely with Senator Peters when I was the Labor Secretary of the United States. And in politics, you've got workhorses and show horses. Gary Peters is the quintessential workhorse. He has delivered for the state of Michigan. And Michiganders will understand that. They've had enough with the theatrics of Donald Trump. They want leaders who are going to keep their promises, who are going to fight for infrastructure, who are going to help us address this coronavirus crisis. And Gary Peters has done that. He has put his head down in the United States Senate. He has worked with the North Star being, how do I improve the lives of Michiganders? And we've made major investments at the DNC in partnership with the Michigan State Party, led very ably by Lavora Barnes. We've made massive investments in Michigan, designed not only to help Joe Biden, but to help Democrats up and down the ticket. And I'm very bullish about Gary Peters. I'm also bullish about winning the 4 seats in the Michigan House of Representatives so that we can flip the House there. We're very, very mindful of our role at the DNC. Our role is to help elect Democrats up and down the ticket. We need Gary Peters in Washington. We're fighting hard in that race, and we'll continue to fight hard. And I think Gary Peters is on the right side of all the issues because he wants to protect and expand healthcare. He wants to make sure we take sensible approaches that will reduce the coronavirus. He believes that we should protect farmers and bring back manufacturing, invest in infrastructure. And his opponent is a Donald Trump clone. We don't need more Donald Trumps in Washington.
My last one here. As Michiganders have been watching the pandemic unfold, they've also been watching Governor Gretchen Whitmer campaign for Vice President Joe Biden. Talks of her being in the race for his vice presidential pick, have been swirling for months. Are we any closer to finding out who the pick could be? And is that pick Governor Gretchen Whitmer?
The Vice President Biden, that is, has indicated that he hopes to make a decision by around the end of this month. So it's coming up very soon. I have great respect for Gretchen Whitmer, and there's so many Democratic governors who have excelled during this pandemic, leading, notwithstanding the absence of partnership with the Trump administration. And Gretchen Whitmer has been doing just that. I think she has been following the science, been really doing a spectacular job. I don't know who I don't know who the vice president's nominee and running mate will be, but what I do know is this, whoever it is, the choice will be historic, and our nation will indeed be making history. We need leaders who understand the necessity of putting people first, making sure we address those critical issues. I'm so impressed with what Governor Whitmer has done in less than 2 years on the job. She has had to do a lot of crisis management. And unfortunately, with no help from Washington, the job has gotten harder. And notwithstanding that, she continues to excel. And Michiganders, I think, are incredibly proud of the leadership they've seen from Governor Whitmer. And I am really excited for her and appreciative of her as well.
Do you have a pick right now? Do you have someone that you would like to be the running mate going forward?
I love all the folks because I've worked with just about all the folks who are under consideration. And we have an embarrassment of riches. That is the reality of our situation. And I can't wait for the choice, and I can't wait to continue our work. We're leaving no stone unturned in the state of Michigan. We're organizing everywhere. I just did a call recently with rural Michigan Democratic leaders because we understand that we've got to organize in every zip code across this state. And that's exactly what we're doing under the very able leadership of Lavora Barnes. And we've got so many allies on the ground there. People understand that this is indeed the most important election of our lifetime. Our jobs are on the ballot. Our nation's health is on the ballot. Healthcare is on the ballot. And our character as a nation, frankly, is on the ballot. You know, what did Donald Trump do last week? Rather than focus singularly on the coronavirus, he's commuting the sentence of one of his cronies. This culture of corruption that has engulfed this administration, he hasn't drained the swamp, he's made it bigger. And people are tired of a tweeter-in-chief. They want a commander-in-chief.